Maybe we'll just start with your name and what your role is here at Fort Greene Park and for the parks in general.
Sure. So my name is Teddy Bailey. I'm an urban park ranger. I work all over Brooklyn, and I'm based in Fort Greene Park.
Can you discuss this area before the Revolutionary War and before the fort was built?
It was all farmland. The Dutch came before the English, of course, and they sort of only made it. They made a real sort of like breadbasket for agriculture. So they would have pastures that were really important. They would have a lot of mills. Pre-Dutch, it was where the Lenape lived. So the Lenape were the Native American people that lived in the Northeast, specifically in this area. Sometimes the Lenape are called the original people, but they were pretty much kind of up to sort of like mid-upstate down to around Delaware. But they used this area because all the marshes and the waterways, you had all the oysters they needed, all the mussels. The woodlands had tons of deer, turkey, beaver, turtle, all sorts of things that the really healthy ecosystem also helped them survive.
And can you talk about Fort Putnam and its role in the Revolutionary War?
Sure. So a lot of people wonder why it wasn't Fort Greene to begin with, and it's because Fort Greene, or rather Nathaniel Greene, sort of reached his pinnacle and gained his notoriety in the Revolutionary War. So he was with Washington during 1776, during the Battle of Brooklyn, but he didn't really earn his claim to fame until like managing the Southern campaign. He was one of George Washington's most trusted men. So it changed a little bit after the Revolutionary War, and sometimes people on the topic of names, they'll see they think it was called Washington Park, and when they tried to make it in a park, they tried to change the name. But not too dissimilar to when we try to change the name of a bridge, many people already knew it as Fort Greene, so they kept calling it that. So some people I think the Triborough Bridge is now called the RFK Bridge, but everyone kind of still calls it the Triborough. The reason it turned into a park is after sort of the War of 1812, it was just a green space. So people were going, just as they were going to Greenwood Cemetery, and it kind of just switched roles. So when Central Park was being built, Brooklynites couldn't go there. So they had to sort of get their own park. So Fort Greene was one of the first ones that came in. Commodore Barry sometimes gets called Brooklyn's first park, but Fort Greene, Commodore Barry, and Prospect Park were the first real parks that came into being.
So what was Walt Whitman's role in the park's creation?
Yeah, well, he advocated for many things. He lived nearby. He really helped push for the monument itself to be built, and he pushed for Brooklyn to start getting its green space.
Can you talk about the prior monument and then this new monument that exists now and when it was built?
If the new monument you're referring to is the giant monument, so that was 1908. And that got built by Stanford White, who was infamous for all of his work around the city. He also designed the Nature Center, but that's usually not what people think about when they think about Stanford White. They think about the Washington Square Park Arch, the Second Penn Station, pretty much the Grand Army Plaza Arch. But he was a really, really famous architect. He's a very interesting story as well if you're looking for something to go into. British targeted New York after losing the siege of Boston because they had loyalists. The bay doesn't freeze, or the water wouldn't freeze as easily as Boston, and they could go up the Hudson River and sort of sever the colonies from the rest. So once they had New York, they had the ships, and then after they had left, all those remains were sort of left in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Originally, it was this wooden mausoleum, I believe, on Sand Street. And it was a volunteer who had the remains, and he put them into that sort of temporary mausoleum, and that fell into disrepair. And then Daughters of the American Revolution, Walt Whitman, a lot of other organizations pushed for something more concrete, more deserving, more sort of like dignified for all the troops that died on the prison ships, because more people died on the prison ships than they did in the actual war.
So what's your favorite part about this park?
My favorite part of Fort Greene is the access that it provides. So you're close to 1 million trains. We have a red-tailed hawk nest just outside the park, so we have red-tailed hawks that regularly hunt here. We have tons of migratory birds that come here. We have really, really rich American history, so much so that people are constantly surprised that all this happened, and it's a really good sort of launch point to talk about the Battle of Brooklyn, talk about America fighting the British Empire, talking about America's role today, to contextualize lots of history. It's really fantastic. We can also do really good youth education because so many kids are so close. So from a historical perspective, it's great to have something that we're so close to the place and the resources within the place, but also ecologically, it's so nice to have a green space that people can just take the train to. If we're trying to make arguments for ecological education for kids, but all the kids have to go to Glacier National Park and they have to take a plane or a train, right? That's not very accessible. But Fort Greene, you can literally stumble in and identify ginkgos or London planes or Osage orange trees, and you can get a sense of place. So when these environmental arguments are happening across, legislative chambers and in policy, people have a connection to these environmental resources, and they can happen in their backyard. So if thousands of people can come through this park every day, then thousands of people are able to learn about these sort of meanings behind either historical or environmental resources.
And then what role do the rangers play in maintaining and educating about this park?
Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of times when we talk to kids and we ask the kids, what is it that a park ranger does? They say, you clean the park, you take care of the park, and people will come and thank us because the park looks so good. And this is a fantastic opportunity for me to say that I don't do any of that. There's many other people that deserve credit. Max the gardener is fantastic. Rosa, who's a maintenance worker. Kirby, a great maintenance worker. Mike, fantastic people that make Fort Greene look really, really good. And they balance the really high use that Fort Greene gets with sort of access to the best of their abilities. So the amount of people that come to this park, it's not dissimilar to parts of Central Park or Prospect Park. And when people go to natural spaces, we inherently can mess it up. We leave litter, we leave barbecues. When we walk on areas, we compact the soil. So the maintenance workers do such a good job. So in terms of the maintenance of the park or the care for the park, they deserve all the credit. People come up and thank me, and I say, no, you should give it to Rosa, because if you ever picked up after someone else's birthday party, it can be hard, especially if you really love the park, it can be disheartening. So it's important for them to get thanks. We do a lot of the education. So we primarily do environmental education, and in Fort Greene in particular, we do a lot of historical education. So sometimes we'll be building bird feeders with kids. Sometimes we'll be teaching them about colonial games that people will play, in this park in particular. We do a lot of tree walks. Sometimes we'll be doing red-tailed hawk education, because in March, April, May, when the red-tails have their the hawklets, the young juvenile hawks, incubating in the nest and then hunting in the park. It's such a cool thing to be able to show people a red-tailed hawk swooping by and seeing its wingspan, and if it's an adult, being able to see the red feathers on its tail. So cool, especially if they're just coming to the park because they want to maybe necessarily have a quiet place to sit. It's great when nature sort of introduces itself in that way.
Anything else that you want to say, or you want to add, or you have an opinion about?
Just really, the maintenance workers do fantastic work. They have a tough job where you're cleaning up after everybody, but they do it really diligently. And this park, especially lately, maybe it was all the rain, but the grass is looking really good. Some of the gardens here are fantastic. So if you're looking for someone to thank, a lot of times the rangers, we serve as the figurehead. People contact us, but there's so many people in parks that are just doing great work. And people usually thank the rangers after a program, but I try to push all that to the maintenance workers and administrative staff that keep a lot of things running. So just that they deserve some credit too.